Hello and welcome to the 31st video in the Project Sovereign series. In this video, I'll create the auxiliary torpedo launchers as well as the deflector sensor node. Should be some fun modeling, so let's get started. So now I'm ready to detail the forward bottom section of the secondary hull. So I'm going to make this black bottom plate, and I'm also going to make these, which I think are like auxiliary torpedo launchers for photon torpedoes, just in case, for some reason the quantum torpedoes didn't work or something weird like that. They would always have these to turn to. That's just in my head. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's what I'm going to call it. So let's get started. All right, so I have these selected. And the first thing that I want to do is just make sure that everything is lined up the way that it should be. This is all looking pretty good. And I'm going to need to inset them so they line up with this, like these flow really nicely right through here. So let me get into orthographic. And you'll notice that I've selected these even though they're off the center axis. So they're not going to matter when the symmetry modifier gets put on, but you'll see why in just a moment. So inset. And I probably want to bring it down a bit more, just so it looks like these are nice and flowing. Let me check. Now there seems to be a bit of a snag right here with the vertices, but that's okay. We can fix that. So I'm just going to check this and make sure my edge constraints are on and just drag it over. It used to freak me out when I saw that happening, but I realized I could fix it without too much trouble. And just this I'm going to move into. So that's looking pretty good. And again, not worried about this at all because it's not going to be part of the final model as it's off the center axis. Okay, and extrude. 007. Apply my gray material. Symmetry. All right, so there's a little something here. I can clean this up. This is just some extra edges here, but I could clean this up after the symmetry modifier has been completely collapsed. But that's not going to be for a while because there's still a lot more work to do. But this is done. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut the notch out here, and this will be for the photon torpedo launchers. I did a bit of cleanup work off camera as I was preparing for the next part of the ship. And it turned out that these vertices in the center here were a little bit off center, so I got to clean them up after all, which was good. I also repositioned some of these around the edges, and as you can see, I moved these back so I would have room for my cutout where the torpedo launchers will be. So I have these selected, and if you remember how I did these window cutouts up here, then you'll probably know what's coming next. And we're going to hinge from edge. Hinge from edge. I'm going to choose my hinge, which will be this guy. And lower the angle. And I'm not too worried about the angle setting because I can always fix it, but it'll be nice to kind of get it in one go here. So that's actually looking pretty good. So I'm just going to check that. And let's see how that looks with symmetry. Okay, it's not bad. I know there's going to be some cleanup work here because there usually is. Let me isolate this whole piece. Whoa. Let's see up front. This is a little difficult to see. Yeah, so stuff like this. So I'm just going to target weld all of this. And I will be back for the next part of the build. What I need to do now is gradually flatten this curve. So it's flat here, but it remains curved up here. It's a little bit strange, but I think I figured out a way how to do it. So I'll show you the reference. how it's flat at the top here. Like it remains curved down here, but it's flat at the top, but then it sort of stays curved. It's a little strange, so I think I figured out a way to do it though. So what I need to do is select these and smoosh them like that. So these are nice and flat, but it's going to be too jarring a change. Like here it's flat and then it curves. It's not going to be soft the way that I want it to be. So let me select these and I'll smoosh them, but not so much. Oh, don't forget this one. Just so it's a bit more flat, but not totally flat. And then I'll finally get this. And just a little bit. So it's a gradual change. There we go. I think that should work. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to look good. See, so it's flat, but then it curves, and then it's finally curved to meet the rest of the hull here. If this was completely flat, it would be strange. It'd be a sharp crease here, and that's not what I want. So this is going to work perfectly. I think this is going to be really good. So now the fun part, actually building the torpedo launchers themselves. So for continuity's sake, I'm going to make the torpedo launcher the same as the quantum torpedo one. I know they're different torpedo styles, but I like to think that they use the same casing anyway, and it'll probably look right on the model, so let's just create a box. And just kind of size it up. All right, so that should be the rough size of it. Just double check and put it in place. There we go. Yep, that'll work. Great. Just like that. Nice. Okay, so we can put a bit more detail on this, of course. So chamfer. I'll raise the amount. That looks fine. Cool. All right. And I'll turn this into an edible poly. And extrude this. Actually, let me inset it first. There we go. Extrude. I want to make it go back, but not so far back that it goes into the model. Because I want it to be its own. I want it to be its own thing with lights and everything. So just like that. And we can also have some fun. We can create some of the kind of inverse rifling inside, like on the original torpedo launcher for the refit Enterprise. It's like horizontal. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So let me ring that and connect. That's good. Don't want to get too carried away with this. It's a very minor detail, but I guess those are the most fun, right? Jam for that. About 0.5. Is that 0.05? There we go. Great. And extrude these. Local normal. There we go. Okay, I think I'm going to add one more detail. Yeah, I'm going to create I don't know what they're called on a real gun, but the holes around the muzzle. They're on the TMP torpedo launcher too. So I'll create another box. Actually going to isolate these two items because it's getting a little difficult to see what I'm doing. There we go. Align that. And way too big for what I want to do. Use my handy dandy array tool again. I love this thing. I don't know how I ever got along without it. Okay, way less than 10, probably 5. Yeah, that's fine. Don't want to get too crazy with this. I'm just having some fun. That, and then turn this. Copy it. Probably only have room for like 2 or 3 of these here. Yeah, I think I'll just do 2. Make sure that's more or less evenly spaced. You can just do this by eye. Don't need to get too nuts with this. Okay. Let me convert this editable poly. And I'll start attaching. I'll do my favorite. Pro Boolean. And I'm not going to do imprint right now. I just want to cut holes in it. Oops. I guess it was a bit too far over. Yeah, that looks weird. Should have checked that, huh? Before I did the cut, but whatever, no harm done. And again, we're just having some fun. Let's see. I think that'll be all right. There we go. Just to add some visual interest to it, let me add my gray material to it. And isolate. And finally, how about throwing a symmetry modifier on there? All right. So we've got a bit more going on than the studio model, which is something that I always like to do with a CG model because we can afford to do this, right? We can zoom in as close as we want, add as much detail as we want. Don't want to get carried away because this is a minor part of the ship and there's still a lot more work to do. But that's our torpedo launcher. So I spruced up the torpedo area and I also created the sensor node here. So this video is getting a little bit long, so I just chronicled what I did and I'll show you how I did it right now. First, I created a segmented box and I applied a bend modifier, so now it conforms to this curved deflector area. I then converted it into an editable poly and added an FFD modifier, and I was able to sculpt the shape from there. I then added a symmetry and a turbo smooth modifier, so I was able to work on it as an editable mesh. I did the Pro Boolean imprint to create the grooves. Then I performed the extrusion as a group local normal. And finally extruded the grooves themselves. And there you have it. So this is the front of the deflector area, as well as the entire secondary hull completed, except for the windows, of course. In the next video, I'll work on this section, this fantail scoop, which will include these shapes here as well as these. So it's just going to be more cutting out and extruding like you've seen before. This might present a bit of a challenge because it's curved, so that might do some odd things to the geometry and the way it's projected, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Moving our way further and further back on the ship. Getting pretty excited. And I can't wait to do more. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon.